Welcome back. I'm Seth, and this is,
I'm Seth.
and we're here today to talk a little bit about. This is our theme song section of our podcast, and today Seth is going to lead the discussion in his choice of song and book.
Okay, so the story, or the novel that we're going to be talking about this time is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. So it's a classic piece of Gothic fiction. It's a book that I personally hadn't read until relatively recently. And I had really complicated feelings about it when I first started reading it, because it's the kind of story that is really easy to misinterpret as being moral. So, in other words, basically the whole core premise of the story is the main character, Dorian Gray, is friends with an artist whose name is Basil. And this artist is, he and his friends are really obsessed with the concept of beauty. And Dorian is a very attractive, beautiful person, and so Basil wants to do a portrait of him, and he paints a portrait of Dorian, and then this portrait, in sort of a supernatural way, ends up taking on Dorian's
Dorian is, so it's interesting because up to this point, Dorian is not necessarily really aware of his own beauty.
No.
It's the painter.
It's through his interactions with the
who
painter
makes
and
him
with
aware
the
of it, and then
Lord Wotton, who kind of introduce him to this mindset that is the central theme of the story, of that they idolize the concept of beauty to a point that
well John, who's Lord what's his name, I think is John. He idolizes youth more than he does beauty even.
Yes.
So Basil's Basil's the one who really idolizes beauty.
But I feel like in terms of the themes of the story, that the youth ties into it, because the youth is a form of beauty in a way. It's when we're young, you're in the part of your life that you're most likely to be considered beautiful, but it's also something that is inherently fleeting. And so in the story, Dorian, through his influence from these people, starts to be really hyper aware of his own youth and beauty, and also the fact that it's going to go away really quickly.
Right, and that's his friend John, who really is the one who because Basil.
I think it's Henry. Actually.
Or Henry, maybe it is Lord Henry. Yes, yeah, Lord Henry. But Basil, the thing about Basil is that he's kind of the opposite of Henry. And that's the thing is that you've got these two friends that Dorian has.
Yeah.
In Basil and in Henry, and Basil is the one who he does sort of idolize the beauty, not like Henry does, though.
They're both presenting two different sides of a similar philosophical view, but they're very different sides of it.
Right.
I mean, the artist wants to capture beauty in a way that can be eternal, in a way that
preserved. Right. He can preserve it. Right. He wants, and the artist Basil, he's kind of a moralist. Really, he has very specific moral standards, whereas Lord Henry is the opposite. He has no moral standards.
Yeah.
And so you get Dorian, who's kind of pulled between these two, and it's interesting because Lord Henry and Basil are also friends.
Yeah.
But Dorian kind of gets pulled between these two different philosophies of life. One is a moral philosophy, and the other is an amoral philosophy.
So ultimately, the painting that Basil creates of Dorian ends up taking on Dorian's age and imperfections, and as he gets older, he stays young and beautiful and almost seemingly, at least physically, perfect, while the painting gets worse and worse. And it's very easy with the way that the story goes, and I thought this before I read the book, to interpret it as when he does bad things, the painting gets worse and reflects that, and therefore the story is about don't do bad things, which really isn't the point at all. Like, he makes bad decisions in the story, absolutely, to the point of actually murdering his friend. Spoiler warning. But as we said before, all these episodes are going to have spoilers, and this is also a very old book. So if you haven't read it already, you absolutely should go and read it. It's pretty short and it's really fantastic. But the thing that leads him to make all of the negative decisions that he makes in the story is this growing obsession with his own youthfulness and beauty, to the point that he rejects the painting and won't look at it because he can't deal with imagining himself being that person who he realistically would be. So the song that I picked, that I think goes along with this really, really well, and you'll be able to tell instantly from the title that it fits with this story exactly, is Forever Young by Alphaville. So that's it. Episode over. We've heard the title. We know.
Yeah, there you go. So let's talk, because I think there's a lot to this book. In fact, I just re-listened to it on Audible in preparation for this podcast.
Yeah.
And there's actually a lot to this book that I was not remembering specifically. In that Dorian is always seeking for the next thing, because he's got this eternal youth and eternal beauty, or at least what appears to be that, and so.
But none of the things that he wants can really be eternal in the same way. So he keeps turning to new things because nothing will satisfy him for long. Right.
So interestingly, he does do a lot of very wicked things that the author makes it very clear that these are bad things.
Yeah.
But the author also doesn't tell us what most of them are. He makes some suggestions that he's doing these things, but he never actually says this is what he does. Now there's obviously the two exceptions is the murder of his friend.
Yeah.
And the other one is the laudanum, doing drugs.
Oh,
so
yeah.
There's the scene with the drugs. There's the scene with the murder. Those are the two actual things that we see. But he alludes to the fact that he's doing a lot of other really bad things, and he's damaging and hurting and ruining the reputations of his friends, the people that are around him. The only person he can't ruin the reputation of is Lord Henry. Because Lord Henry's
already
doesn't have a
reputation.
I was going to say Lord Henry had a bad reputation before Dorian did, and so he can't damage his reputation because his reputation stays the same, and can't really damage Basil's reputation because Basil won't engage with him in these immoral behaviors.
Yeah.
So it's pretty clear. It's not a moralist book, and yet there's clearly a sense of he's doing things he shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, there's a sense of morality within the story. It's just not really what the story is about.
Right. Okay, so let's get into the song.
Yeah, absolutely.
And start talking about the song.
So we start with, in the first verse, it says, "Let's dance in style, let's dance for a while." I'm immediately getting the feeling of this obsession or connection with like style and beauty and youth, especially as in the next line, "Heaven can wait, we're only watching the skies." They're not focusing on the things that have real value because of the distraction of this thing that Dorian is idolizing, that ultimately is fleeting and not. Anyway, then it says, hoping for the best but expecting the worst. Are you going to drop the bomb or not? And I think there's sort of a building tension throughout the entire story where every time he interacts with the painting, even when he's just seeing it behind a cloth, it like tortures him. Like he's getting worse and worse, like emotionally and mentally, because this painting is always there reminding him of what he should be. And so you got kind of this tension of, are you going to drop the bomb or not? When is his relationship with the painting going to come to a head?
It's also interesting in this story, he frequently refers to the painting as his soul.
Yes.
And so as the painting becomes disfigured and grotesque, that's what he sees inside himself. He actually has to see physically what in the painting what he is inside, whereas outside everybody else sees him as this almost perfect, innocent, youthful character.
Mm-hmm.
And he's always worried that somebody is going to see the picture. And so he ends up putting it up in this room that's locked away. He's got it behind multiple locks.
Yeah. There's no way that anyone but him could ever get into it.
And yet he's still so terrified that somebody might get in there and see it. So and at points in the book he has to come back to the house just to make sure that nobody has opened that door, even though he's the only one with a key.
Yeah. And
it's locked under multiple locks, and nobody has a reason to go in there anyways. And so it's really kind of fascinating to me, this are you going to drop a bomb or not? That's this whole thing of him worrying about this painting. Is anybody going to see who he really is and what he really is?
Yeah.
I also really like the line, hoping for the best but expecting the worst.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is more, not so much Dorian as much as Lord Henry.
Mm-hmm.
That's Lord Henry's philosophy. Lord Henry is like the biggest pessimist about life, and yet is always encouraging people to go out and make the most of this moment, in the sense of eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die kind of thing, right? Not in a good way, but in a bad way. But he's always expecting the worst. He's always talking about how youth fades and the good things in life are going to fade, and you're going to, because only when you're youthful can you experience these things, which that's kind of his philosophy. So I think that those two lines really kind of capture this whole Lord Henry's influence on Dorian, and then are you going to drop the bomb or not is Dorian's fear that painting is going to be seen by anybody. He doesn't want anybody to see it because he's terrified that they will know who he actually is.
Mm-hmm. So the next it says, let us die young or let us live forever. I mean, that's obviously the whole perspective that the characters have, that it's better to either die young and preserve that. Either way, you're preserving some kind of immortal youth that is realistically unattainable, but it's what they want.
Right.
And as I say, it's realistically unattainable, so the next line says, we don't have the power, but we never say never. And then, sitting in a sand pit, life is a short trip, the music's for the sad men. And I think that the last line there really speaks to the fact that throughout the entire story, Dorian is never happy.
No.
He stops wanting to be happy after a while, but this obsession that he has, it doesn't actually make him happy. It doesn't make him feel fulfilled, and yet he keeps turning to it. He keeps turning to the music of youth and beauty and all of these fleeting things that he wants, that he keeps going to temporarily and then moving on from, because none of them end up really meaning anything for him for a long time. He even has a girl that he falls in love with, who's an actress, except he doesn't really fall in love with her. He falls in love with the characters that she plays, which is playing into that idea of he's falling in love with the beauty of her acting and not really with her as a person, because he can't see anything that has real value, including people.
Right. And what it says here, we don't have power, but we never say never. That's obviously a good allusion to his. What happens is, Basil paints this picture of him, and in the beginning of the book, he's perfectly satisfied with that. He's happy with the painting. He's happy with Basil, but when Lord Henry comes and says, yeah, but that painting is, he specifically says, that painting is going to stay young, and you are going to get old, and you're going to get wrinkled, and your hair is going to thin, and your hair is going to change colors. It's going to go white, and he kind of paints this illusion, and then Dorian says, "I would give my soul if the painting could grow old instead of me."
And then that's exactly what happens.
And so that's the thing is he basically makes a deal with the devil.
Almost, yeah.
I will give my soul. Well, he does. He says, "I will give my soul to exchange places with this painting," and then I think where you really see it start to happen, the first time that you see that happen is when he does tell Sybil, the actress,
yeah,
I don't love you. I can't love you anymore because you were this beautiful picture and now you're not, and she ends up committing suicide.
Yeah.
And initially he blames himself, but then Lord Henry comes and convinces him that it wasn't his fault, that she was going to do that, and you get this moment where and then Lord Henry invites him to the opera, and Basil comes and says, "Oh, I heard about the death, and I'm so sorry because I know you loved this woman," and this is the first time you see where Dorian kind of is in a way soulless, in that he should be grieving for this girl that he thought that he was in love with, and he's not, and he's just acting like nothing happened and going off to the opera with his other friend, and then that's the first time also where you see in the picture, when he looks at the picture and there's this kind of an evil grin, kind of smile on the picture that the innocence is lost.
Yeah. So
it's just fascinating because you have that scene where that happens, where you see that the innocence is lost in the portrait, but Dorian still has the look of innocence in himself.
And that's reflected in the song here in the next section, where it says, "Can you imagine when this race is won, turn our golden faces into the sun, praising our leaders we're getting in tune, the music's played by the madman." And you got this feeling of the ending when the race is won, turn our golden faces into the sun. When we get to the end, we'll realize that that what was being created here was mad. That Dorian is losing himself and his soul to this lifestyle that he's chosen to live. And then the chorus.
Okay, really quickly before we get to the chorus, because I love the line, "The music's played by the madman," because there is a specific part in the book where he goes through these different things that he gets into. Like for a little while he's into tapestries, for a little while he's into gems and jewels and jewelry. There's a point where he gets really into music.
Yeah. And
as he gets more and more into the music, it comes to a point where he's kind of into this really kind of I don't know what you call it, kind of barbaric type music. And that he has these kind of crazy mixtures of musical styles that he brings into his home, and it's just the music's played by the madman. I think you get this sense that everything that he gets into eventually becomes corrupt.
Right.
And that's even the music that he was getting into was corrupted by his lifestyle and his desire to to find something that he cared about, that he really could love, and he really ended up not being able to, and so that's why he goes from thing to thing. But anyways,
yeah. So then the chorus kind of just presents the whole philosophical question, the same philosophical question that the story presents, as it says, "Forever young, I want to be forever young. Do you really want to live forever, forever and ever?" And then repeats that. So it's Dorian wants to live forever in this youth, and then it says, "Do you really want to? What is the cost of that?"
Right. And I actually think that Basil, again, the painter, is the person who asks that question to Dorian.
Mm-hmm.
He's frequently the one that's there, and Dorian keeps pushing him away and inviting Lord Henry, who's the one who says, "Yeah, you do want to live forever young. This is you want, And Lord Henry says he wants to live forever young. He just doesn't know how to do it. And in fact, there's a point in the book where they're in their 40s, and Lord Henry's like, "Dorian, how do you keep yourself so young? You got to tell me this trick, because I'm old and I look old, but you don't." And I do think Basil is that voice of, do you really want to live forever? But I agree, it's also that, what are you giving to be able to live forever young? What are you giving up? What are you losing?
Mm-hmm. So then getting into the second verse, we start with "Some are like water, some are like the heat. Some are a melody and some are the beat. Sooner or later they will all be gone. Why don't they stay young?" So this is kind of in a way it's like Lord Henry's lament of, he's growing old, he's starting to feel and see the consequences of that, and he's like, how are you staying young like this? Why can't this be my life? Why don't they all stay young? And then in a way the next part of the verse is could be Dorian's answer to that, because it says, "It's so hard to get old without a cause. I don't want to perish like a fading horse. Youth's like diamonds in the sun, and diamonds are forever." So it starts by saying it's so hard to get old without a cause. He's been bouncing between things. He has a hard time feeling satisfied by anything because he doesn't really have a purpose. But the purpose that he thinks that he has, that he always keeps turning to, is this idea of this eternal youth that he idolizes, even though he internally knows that it's not giving him the satisfaction that he wants. He still says that youth's like diamonds in the sun and diamonds are forever. He thinks that this should work, even though it's not. So he keeps
right, and he says,
I
don't want to perish like a fading horse," or you might change that just a little bit. "I don't want to perish like my fading portrait."
Oh,
that
yeah,
he
yeah,
sees.
yeah.
I don't want to fade like this portrait. Youth is like a diamond in the sun, and diamonds are forever. And he's thinking, this should be what I'm looking for. And actually, the next line goes right into that. If you want to go on to there.
Yeah, the final
stanza there.
Part of the song before we get into the repeating chorus at the end again says, "So many adventures couldn't happen today. So many songs we forgot to play. So many dreams swinging out of the blue. We'll let them all come true."
So again, this is Dorian. All these adventures that he's having, all these experiences that he's having, that he's creating for himself, all these dreams, they're swinging out of the blue, and they're nothing is giving him this sense of meaning that he wants to have, like it said in that earlier.
I mean, I love especially the line, "So many songs we forgot to play," that it's he's trying to do all these things and missing so many of the meaningful experiences along the way.
Right. So he's actually getting old, but he's not looking old. But he's getting old, and he's getting old without a cause. And then he's having all these adventures, all these songs, all these dreams, but nothing is giving him the cause that he needs to grow old with, because he stayed young, and in staying young, he's kept the immaturity of his youth all the way through into his old age, or his middle age, because he's in his 40s by the end of the book. So he's kept his youth, but not only his physical youth, but his immaturity.
Mm-hmm. And then at the very end of the story, he's forced to confront his portrait. He hasn't seen it in a long time, and he's forced to actually look at it. And because he's held on to this immaturity, he doesn't have the experiences to be able to deal with the traumatic experience of seeing this thing that he's been turning away from this whole time, and he can't deal with it, and he ends up attacking the portrait and destroying it, and in doing so he destroys himself. And the very last image that we see in the book is him lying dead, and he looks like the portrait has this whole time. He looks like he should have if he was actually aging and experiencing all of these imperfections that the portrait was taking on, and the portrait has gone back to looking youthful.
Right. And so then you go back into the chorus, and I think the very last line in the chorus that we end up, the end of the song is, do you really want to live forever? And that's the question that the book is asking.
Exactly.
Excellent. Well, this was, thank you, Seth. I think it's fantastic. I think it's a perfect song for this book, and I think it's a fantastic book. And I think that is the question that people have to ask. Do you really want to live forever? That's the question. And the answer is no. I mean, yes, we want to live forever, but not in this state, right? Where we're in a mortal, imperfect mortal state. He was trying to make an imperfect mortal state be last forever. In fact, if you think about it, it reminds me of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Mm-hmm. And once they partook of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, the Lord couldn't let them eat of the fruit of eternal life, because then they would have lived forever in that state, and that's not the state that we want to live forever in. And so this is the problem: is he's trying to live forever in an imperfect state of existence, rather than allowing his body to age and allowing himself to grow and mature and become what God wants us to become, and then allowing yourself to die and relying on the hope of resurrection through Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. This is a man who didn't have Jesus Christ in his life, and therefore had no hope.
And for us, if we focus too much on who we are in this particular moment, or the nostalgia of the past, so much that it distracts us from being able to look forward to the change that we want to make, who we want to become, the experiences that we're going to have in the future, then it will lead to us missing out on those experiences that we could have, and missing out on that change that we need to be able to become like Christ and be perfected in him.
Right. Very good.
Yeah, so next time next week when we do our next theme song episode, we're going to be talking about the Warriors books by Aaron Hunter, correct?
Yes, we're going to specifically talk about the very first book in the very first series, but it's going to be all of the books overall, and there's a lot of them.
Yes.
But we're going to particularly be thinking about the very first book, mm-hmm. and the main character in the first book, and that's where our theme song will come from.
And my younger sister, who is a really big fan of them, is going to be joining us on that. So really excited for that. So tune in next week to hear what we have to say. And we, of course, also have our Disney Princess analysis episodes that we'll be releasing throughout the rest of this week as well. So we'll see you then.
All right.